relationships really matter in terms of what you're going to accomplish. So to your point, yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons why we were able to get Google, OpenAI, Anthropic, Meta, Microsoft, Amazon, and others to kind of agree publicly to those standards.
I'm John Starr, advisor at Thorn.
I'm Paylez Halai, Senior Manager of Partnerships at Thorn.
And this is Safe Space.
So David, I'm hearing lots of themes where you're talking about responsibility, right? So we're building this tech. What did you say? It goes from head to said very quickly. I'd love to get your thoughts, on what does that mean, right? Responsible tech. We hear ethical AI, responsible AI. We hear that everywhere now. So I'd love to get your take on what is responsible tech and how has that definition changed over time?
I view a responsible tech as creating a technology that is aligned with the public interest. That is different than the kind of AI for good and tech for good movement, which sometimes is usually around like how do we have something that maybe is more environmentally friendly or something similar. I've always viewed responsible tech as recognizing that society needs to come together to embed their values in the technology, and also recognizing inherently that tech is intertwined with the future of democracy and the future of the human condition. So I think that's an important part too. So that was one of the reasons why we've really kind of honed in on the term responsible tech. When we first started in 2018, held a summit in the fall of 2018 in New York. And a lot of competing terms were going around at that time. So our very first summit was actually called a ethical tech summit. But one of the issues that I saw right away was that sometimes ethics as a term can really cause a lot of semantical arguments, which are great from an academic perspective and important and interesting. However, my argument is that we know there's a problem. It's less about verbiage and more about reducing harms and increasing a more proactive approach to make sure that our technology is thoughtful and we're considering its potential adverse impacts and ways that it can go sideways. We were very intentional about responsible tech, and that's why we created a responsible tech guide. First came out in September 2020, a new version every September, and then responsible tech summit, responsible tech mixers, right? So really using that as a clear call. And another kind of important part is I've always intentionally used responsible tech as a quote unquote umbrella term that encompasses areas of trust and safety and responsible AI and youth tech, well-being, technomocracy. There was a lot of confusion at first. And honestly, I personally got a lot of pushback where people say, wait a minute, the responsible AI, youth tech well-being, how are they similar? Well, think about the way that social media has evolved. Every social media platform is now utilizing generative AI. Those communities that were focused, really like subcommunities, focused on responsible AI versus ones who were focused on like youth tech well-being, they weren't interacting enough. The reason why I started All Tech is Human is because I viewed a need to actually bring together all these different communities that I think can benefit from cross-pollinating ideas. So all different backgrounds, different experiences, but it benefits by being together in the same room.
I think it was that kind of drive that brought our two organizations to come to work together more recently. So we're around, I think, a year on from our Safety by Design initiative with All Tech is Human and Thorn. The initiative was around AI-generated CSAM being so in vogue recently, right? So I'd love to hear how you brought together with Thorn, how you brought some of the biggest platforms in the world together, and what this means to you personally, because this is such a big initiative.
I'd love to
hear your take.
Well, the biggest shout out needs to go to Dr. Rebecca Portnoff, who is just a trailblazer, but also Rebecca and I really get along because we both email a tremendous amount and really quickly. On one hand, maybe that seems like a slight aside, but it actually isn't, because when you talk about trying to get all these major platforms involved, I think sometimes we discount grit. And I'm not even joking, right? I think we sometimes think it's all about just a great idea, or maybe this person, what is their position? When in fact, so much of this collaboration has been about conversations, has been about us reaching out to different people, having Zoom chats, having coffees, going to different events, talking to people, going to the after party, having a beer with somebody, right? Relationships really matter in terms of what you're going to accomplish. So to your point, yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons why we were able to get Google, OpenAI, Anthropic, Meta, Microsoft, Amazon, and others to kind of agree publicly to those standards around reducing harms against children and the generative AI scenarios. And I think what was also beneficial at that point is this was first released in April of 2024. So relatively speaking, early on for the public awareness of a lot of these issues. So it was actually like right as some of the notification app were taking off, and there was a big incident in Spain and a few other school districts. But I think one of the things that I really have enjoyed working with Thorn about is the recognition, which is similar to the whole ethos of safety by design, is that we need to be less reactive and more proactive. So when we started seeing how these different models could be misused and abused, that's when you need to start laying the groundwork. And I think what we're doing is one kind of key part of a key lever of change, right? Going after like the technical kind of aspect, and that kind of works in tandem with both a regulatory environment and education, and directly working with youth as well. So those are different pressure points that I think are important for reducing harms.
So, so this partnership, right? You mentioned some big names, Thorn and All Tech is Human, maybe being some of the smaller names in some of the names that you dropped.
Definitely less money.
Right,
Definitely less money.
Less money. And I think it can sound a little bit abstract, right? There's this big partnership. We're using words like safety by design.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about what specifically is All Tech is Human and Thorn doing that is specifically helping trust and safety teams? Because we are not a trust and safety team, right? But we are able to help them in ways that they may not understand. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, one of the biggest parts was that working with Thorn, I'll Take Us Human, and Rebecca Portnoff really taking kind of that lead, putting together a working group that led to the Safety by Design paper that came out at the same time as these standards were announced. And then we also, as an organization, put out a white paper not too long ago talking about even some of the inherent trade-offs. To your question about what does it mean for trust and safety teams, what I've always noticed with All Tech is Human is that we sometimes are biased into thinking that people in large companies, or I also deal with a lot of different consulates and embassies, and then some work with the UN, UNDP. We always assume wrongly that all of these groups have access to all of this knowledge and all of the relationships, right? All the right people. Whereas in fact, what this collaboration has really done is it has brought together so much of the best practices and these kind of key learnings, and been able to kind of directly position that into major tech companies and their trust and safety teams. So that has been something that we've always tried to establish, right? So All Tech is Human is kind of positioned somewhat uniquely as a agnostic connective tissue between society, government, industry, and academia. A situation like this with the partnership, it allows for more of a perpetual learning process that then gets distributed to key individuals that need to have this information. That is a huge kind of part, because I think a lot of times, an organization might create this great piece of content, but then is there a way to also make that learning bi-directional and get feedback and then perpetual learning? So I think that's something that is really important with this partnership, is constantly assessing what's working, what's not, and then retooling and then redistributing some of that knowledge. I think that's going to be key. And you also, quickly you asked about these concepts can sound abstract. And that's totally true. I think that's been one of the problems with a lot of this area is one, I think around child safety is the fact that people like to put their head in the sand. The issues are so dark that it's easier to have ignorance than to actually recognize it and say, oh my God, what are we going to do about this? But two, I think the other issue is that we haven't always benefited from collective intelligence. And that's where I see a lot of benefit. I've always designed All Tech is Human as a form of collective intelligence. And in child safety, even when we look at things early on with like photo DNA, there's a huge collaborative backstory around child safety. That's an area where a lot of major companies have put aside their kind of competitiveness and recognized that these issues are so significant and the absence of action is so, it has the potential to cause so much harm that it's allowed people to actually form a higher level of collaboration. And that's something we're really leaning into.
I couldn't agree more. I think that there is a multi-year list of collaboration and sharing and innovation, from proactive detection tools to signal sharing to creating best practice principles that I think, to your point earlier, David, really underscore this sort of illustration of creating the environment to solve problems. And so really have appreciated the time that you've spent with us. I get the sense that, like many folks in trust and safety, this is just part of the conversation with David Polgar. You can catch more highlights and the full Safe Space episode here.